Miss Jennifer, come to the stage, please. Okay. Hi. Good evening. I'm Valerie Lang. I'm an animal law teacher here at the college, and I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for coming out tonight to hear this most extraordinary man. A few preliminary matters I want to mention. First of all, I think I just advanced your slide, Gene. Sorry. What is going around is two pieces of paper you should be aware of. A sign-in sheet, so we know exactly how many people are here, just get an idea of how to contact you again if you're interested in this topic. The other is there is literature going around if you want more information on Farm Sanctuary, and you may not sign up for that right now, but after Gene's talk, I have a feeling you're going to be signing up. So that's one thing. The other is we will not have an intermission. If you need to go, they're right outside, but we're not going to break for that. We're going to go for probably an hour and a half or 2 hours at the most. But if you need a break, just excuse yourself, and that's how that's going to work. Another interesting point is that we have an artist on campus who has put together a display called No Mercy, and it's about the plight of animals in factory farming. Her work is on display outside on the TV monitor, and what she's going to do is if anyone wants to purchase any of this, 50% of the proceeds will go to Farm Sanctuary, and it's incredibly thought-provoking work. I've seen it. I encourage you to take a look at the TV monitor. And again, your purchase would, if you do choose to, half of it would go to Farm Sanctuary. And then after tonight's speaker, we're going to have a book signing. We'll have it down here. And we will corral you and collect your checks, or however we're going to do that when this session is over. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Jen Alley. Jen is a former animal law student of mine who you know, in my course, there are always topics that get you, and Jennifer's was farm animals, and this was a few years ago, and Jen latched on to the topic and the plight of these creatures, and Jen has made it sort of her mission to raise consciousness, and so much so that she and her boyfriend John headed up the Walk for Farm Animals in Albany this past October, well, just October 9th. And they raised $4,588. They had 94 workers. Yeah. I mean, this is a girl that just listens to her conscience, and the farm animal issue speaks to her. So without Jen, I can assure you, Gene would not be here tonight because she has spearheaded his visit. She has done everything to make it possible that he come here tonight. So I really have to, again, give Jennifer Alley the credit for this evening. And so I'm going to pass it over to Jen, and she's going to introduce our speaker, Gene Bauer. Right in there, my dear.
Okay. Everybody hear me okay? Good evening and welcome. First, I just want to thank you, Val, for this opportunity tonight and for everything you do for the animals and for the wonderful animal advocacy program we have at Hudson Valley. It would not have been possible without your strong will and heart behind it, truly. Yeah. It's true. Val's heart, like mine, is full of compassion for the plight of all animals. But like me, there is an extra soft spot that gravitates to the farm animals, the forgotten ones. When I think of Farm Sanctuary, I think of happiness. I think of tranquility, and I think of peace. The peace of mind that all the animals that inhabit these two sanctuaries will never again suffer, live in fear, or be beaten and tortured by a cruel hand. They will frolic, stretch, run, gallop, sleep and eat, and be free to live out the rest of their lives the way they were meant to, free from the chains of confinement, the chains of greed, and the chains of cruelty. They are truly the lucky ones. If you haven't yet visited Farm Sanctuary, I encourage you to do so. I have been to the one here in Watkins Glen, New York, many times. It's truly my home away from home. If I could move in, I would. To be able to visit with these animals, hear the heart-wrenching stories of how they were rescued and saved, fought the odds from a life of misery and a life that would have been cut too short, and then to be able to look into their eyes and see the strength and love that has been built up from time spent at the sanctuary, regaining their hope and trust in us, is truly an indescribable feeling. But for so many of the other ones, they will never get to feel those things. For most, they will live a life of lonely, dark confinement and die a brutal death. It is a sad thought, but an unfortunate truth. But it doesn't have to be this way. Change is amongst us. It is on the horizon. I can feel it, and I hope many of you can as well. People are standing up and taking notice, standing up to cruelty and speaking loudly and passionately that they want to see change for the animals, for the environment, and for our future. Gene Baur has been hailed as the conscience of the food movement by Time magazine. For 25 years, he has traveled extensively, campaigning to raise awareness of the abuses of the industrialized factory farming and our cheap food system. A pioneer in the field of undercover investigations, Gene has visited hundreds of farms, stockyards, and slaughterhouses, documenting the deplorable conditions that exist. His pictures and videos exposing factory farming cruelties have aired nationally and internationally, educating millions about the plight of modern farmed animals. Gene has also testified in courts and before local, state, and federal legislative bodies, advocating for better conditions for farm animals. His most important achievements include winning the first ever cruelty conviction at a U.S. stockyard and introducing the first U.S. laws to prohibit cruel farming confinement methods in Florida, Arizona, and California. His efforts have been covered by top news organizations, including the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, and Wall Street Journal. In 2008, Gene's book, Farm Sanctuary, Changing Hearts and Minds About Animals and Food, became a national bestseller. As a recent guest on the Martha Stewart Show's first ever vegan show, he inspired viewers to eat in alignment with their compassionate values. Gene began his activist career selling veggie hot dogs out of a VW van at Grateful Dead concerts to fund farm animal rescues. That is so cool, yeah. Really. That's cool. I got to stand in front of that van long ago. I did, and it was surreal. It was surreal. Today, he serves as president of Farm Sanctuary, the nation's leading farm animal protection organization, with shelters in New York and California, providing rescue, refuge, and adoption for hundreds of farm animals each year. Farm Sanctuary shelters enable visitors to connect with farm animals as emotional, intelligent individuals. Gene believes these animals stand as ambassadors for the billions on factory farms who have no voice, and he has dedicated his career to advocating on their behalf. Gene holds a bachelor's degree in sociology from California State University Northridge and a master's degree in agricultural economics from Cornell University. I had the pleasure of interviewing Gene a couple years ago for a final project in my animal law class. Here I was, giddy with nervous excitement, and on my way to Farm Sanctuary to interview a man that I have admired and respected for so many years. I was nervous and I was a little intimidated. For me, this was truly a rock star status moment. Sorry, but it was. But when I met Gene, the intimidation I had felt was immediately gone. Gene is one of the most down-to-earth, affable people I have ever met. I was immediately at ease and had a wonderful time listening to him talk about his passion and love for Farm Sanctuary, the farm animals, and all the animals we share the world with. He is compassionate, charismatic, and a true champion for the animals. I left that interview filled with optimism, hope, and promise. Sometimes I wonder if we choose our causes and the things we are most passionate about, or if they choose us. At times, I think maybe the farm animals chose Gene. I am delighted and honored and humbled to introduce to you tonight's speaker, a man with a heart full of compassion, strength, and determination, and the drive to continue educating and motivating us to take a stand together to make the world a better place for the farm animals. Be daring, be different, be first, and don't be afraid to stand up for what you believe in. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gene Bauer.
Thank you very much. That was really nice. Man, that was a really nice introduction. Thank you very much. So thank you, Jen. Thank you, Val. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your concern about these issues. Thank you for thinking about the animals who are too often forgotten, the ones that are killed and eaten by most people in our country. Farm Sanctuary started back in 1986 with the intention of exposing the cruelty and raising awareness, and at the end of the day, encouraging citizens to live in a way that is more aligned with our own compassionate values. Most people are humane. Most people don't like to see cruelty. Most people are uneasy with the suffering that has become commonplace on factory farms. But most people are unwittingly supporting this cruelty by buying animal foods and not thinking very much about it. And when animal advocates raise the issue and encourage people to think about their food choices, oftentimes we hear, "Don't tell me, I don't want to hear about it. It's too upsetting." So I think when people say that, they're implying that they care, that they don't like to know about this suffering, but still they're supporting it. So a big part of our work really has to do with encouraging people to think about our food choices and then ultimately to eat in a way and live in a way that we can feel good about without being in denial and without saying, "I don't want to know." It's about being responsible for our actions, basically, and being aware of the consequences of our actions. So living in a way that is aligned with our values and not living in denial is a big part of our message. And also, we encourage people to live in a way and eat in a way that is aligned with our interests. In our country, we're eating in a way that's killing us. We're eating so many animal foods that heart disease and cancer have become the number 1 and number 2 killers. And we have problems with obesity, osteoporosis, all kinds of things. And a lot of that can be linked to the way we eat. If we eat whole plant foods, which is what we're best designed to eat, we could eliminate many of these problems. There's a movie out called Forks Over Knives that some of you maybe have seen, and if you haven't, I'd encourage you to check it out, Forks Over Knives. It's like forks. We eat with a fork to avoid the scalpel, the knife. And in that movie, they estimate that we could save 70 to 80% on health care costs by shifting to a whole foods, plant-based diet. That's massive. So we encourage people to make food choices that are aligned with our values and our interests. It's not in our interest to eat food that makes us sick, but we're doing it. It's because we're not thinking about it. We're just doing what we do. We have habits. We do things that we grew up doing. And, for myself, I grew up in Hollywood, California. I grew up eating meat. My parents were eating meat. My brothers and sisters were eating meat. Everybody around me was eating meat. I started eating meat without thinking about it. It just kind of happened. I didn't make a conscious choice to eat meat. I think that's how most of us start doing many of the things we do. We just do it because everybody's doing it. And it becomes normal. And then, in our country, at a certain age, it becomes normal to take Lipitor or some other kind of medication. And if everybody's doing it, it's normal. So what has happened is bad has become normal. And I think we need to just assess that and challenge it and say, do I need to take these, Lipitor or whatever it is? And often the answer is no. If we change how we eat and live well and eat good food, we can avoid a lot of these problems. So I'm going to go through a series of slides here showing some of the animals at Farm Sanctuary and talking about our work, and then we'll have some time afterwards for questions, comments, and for some discussion, and I look forward to that. But at Farm Sanctuary, the animals are our friends, not our food. They get to enjoy life. They get to interact in positive ways with people. which is a big departure from what they'd experienced before. They'd only known cruelty at human hands. They'd come from cages where they couldn't move, but once they come to Farm Sanctuary, they're in a safe place, they're able to heal. And they're able to be who they are. Cows are allowed to go outside and graze. Pigs are able to go out and root in the soil. See, these guys are really happy coming back in. They got dirt all over their faces. And at first they're afraid and they're somewhat standoffish. But as time goes, they learn they're in a safe place and they begin to play and have fun and also to show affection. We had a turkey in California we used to call Lydia the hugging turkey because you'd go out to the barn and she would come up to you and crane her neck around your neck like she was giving you a hug. So these animals have feelings. They have emotions. They develop relationships. And they have memories of good and bad things. So they remember when they're being treated kindly and they respond in a positive way to it. Now, I didn't grow up as a vegan. I've been a vegan now since 1985. But I grew up eating meat, as I said, like everybody around me, despite the fact that I love my cat, Tiger. And I was eating all these other animals without thinking about it. But as time went and I learned that I did not have to eat meat or dairy products to live and do well, I shifted, I became a vegan. And over the years, I've learned more and more about the many negative consequences of our animal-based food. And I've got a couple slides here from a book called The China Study. And for anybody interested in health and nutrition, I would recommend The China Study by Colin Campbell, who's a nutritional biochemist at Cornell University. The China Study was what the New York Times called the Grand Prix of Epidemiology, the largest study ever done to look at health and nutrition. And this slide just shows healthcare expenditures per person in the U.S. versus other countries. And you see in the U.S. it's higher. And unfortunately, our healthcare expenditures continue to increase. And hopefully, in the not-too-distant future, we're going to recognize that we can do something about this by changing how we eat. It's really pretty basic. Another cost associated with animal agriculture is the environmental destruction. There's a report the United Nations put out called Livestock's Long Shadow, and these are some of the quotes from that report. They say the livestock sector emerges as one of the top 2 or 3 most significant contributors to the most serious environmental problems at every scale, from local to global. Livestock sector is a major player responsible for 18% of greenhouse gas emissions measured in CO2 equivalent. It's a higher share than transport. So you take all the cars and trains and planes and boats combined, they contribute less to global warming than our animal agriculture system. A vegan driving a Hummer contributes less to global warming than a meat eater riding a bicycle. I'm not going to encourage anybody to ride a Hummer, but just making a point. The findings of the report suggest that the livestock sector should be major policy focus when dealing with problems of land degradation, climate change and air pollution, water shortage, water pollution, and loss of biodiversity. Livestock's contribution to environmental problems is on a massive scale, and its potential contribution to their solution is equally large. The impact is so significant that it needs to be addressed with urgency. Although the UN says that this needs to be addressed with urgency, unfortunately, agribusiness is very influential, and policies change very slowly when it comes to regulating factory farming. Agribusiness is exempt from many laws. They're exempt from environmental laws. They're exempt from labor laws. They're exempt from humane laws. They have preferential access to water, so they pay like 1/10 of the market value for water. And so they're able to use and waste this increasingly scarce commodity. There's some slaughterhouses that use 1.5 million gallons of water a day. And this is on top of all the water that was used to grow the crops, which are then fed to the animals, who are then killed for food. If we ate the crops directly, it would be a lot more much more efficient and much more sensible than raising all these crops to be feeding animals. There was an article in the New York Times a couple years back called Rethinking the Meat Guzzler. And in the article, the author compared the amount of fossil fuels needed for a vegetarian meal versus a meat meal. And he found it took 16 times more fossil fuels for the meat meal. So this is another cost associated with animal agriculture. It's much more fossil fuel intensive. So it's great that people are shifting to riding bikes and carpooling or taking public transit and shifting away from driving, too much. But we could have a bigger impact by shifting to a plant-based diet. And all these problems have been exacerbated by this agribusiness mantra, get big or get out. And over the past several decades, the number of farms in our country has decreased. They've been replaced by these large industrialized operations. Small farms, community-based agriculture has been undermined by industrial animal agriculture, where it's been a race to the bottom. And when Farm Sanctuary started in 1986, I felt it was important to see firsthand what was going on. So I spent a lot of time at Lancaster Stockyards, and that's where that picture was taken. And what I noticed was that my perception of these animals and the way I looked at them was very different than the way these livestock handlers at the stockyard looked at these animals. I would look in their faces, I would see their expressions, I would see their fear. The livestock handlers were literally looking at pieces of meat. They're looking at muscle conformation. They're looking at commodities. They're not looking at living, feeling creatures. And so that's where really the divide occurs. Are these animals living, feeling creatures, or are they commodities? And I think most people think animals are living, feeling creatures. But on these factory farms and in agribusiness, they're seen just as commodities, as pieces of meat from the day they're born until the day they're killed. And behind the stockyard, there was a dead pile where there were, and this, I took this picture one day. It was a hot August day. The maggots were so thick you could hear them buzzing. There were dead sheep, dead cows, dead pigs on the pile. You don't see the pigs in this frame, but they were to the left of it. And as I approached this pile, the sheep at the far right here lifted her head. So we were stunned that a living animal would be thrown on the dead pile. And we took her off the dead pile, found a veterinarian to look at her, and as he started checking her out, she stood up. And that's Hilda, who was our first rescued animal. She lived with us for more than 10 years. And then we began a campaign at Lancaster Stockyards, which is where we found her. And our position was that these downed animals, these sick animals that were unable even to stand, should either be humanely euthanized or they should be given proper veterinary care to be made healthy. They should not be thrown on the dead pile. They should not be left in an alleyway to die. They should not be dragged onto trucks with chains to be taken to slaughter. And all of these were common practices. So we began our No Downers campaign. They should not market downed animals. And at the time, Lancaster Stockyards was seen as a pillar of the community. This is an agricultural area in Pennsylvania. And they were getting ready to celebrate their 100-year anniversary. And meanwhile, they were being criticized by this group of upstart vegans that lived in a school bus on a tofu farm and funded the organization by selling vegetarian hot dogs at Grateful Dead concerts out of our Volkswagen van. And we got that van back on the road this year. I drove it cross-country from New York to California, as this is our 25th anniversary at Farm Sanctuary. So started at our gala. We started at our gala in New York City at Cipriani's Wall Street, fancy black tie event with tuxedos and everything, and celebrities. Jesse Eisenberg, who was in The Social Network, was one of our guys there. And it was really a nice event. And I drove across the country to our, making stops along the way, and ended up at our farm in Orland, California, just sort of to show the range of where we have an effect. And across the country, I found vegan food everywhere. It was wonderful. I remember going to Omaha, Nebraska, walking into a restaurant called New York Chicken and Gyro, and I found vegan gyro sandwiches, vegan shawarma, vegan Philly cheesesteaks in Omaha, Nebraska at this restaurant. So vegan food is everywhere, and it was a really neat thing to see. But back in '86, when we started our campaign at Lancaster, we had a long way to go. But we stayed with it, we documented conditions, and as time went and people in the neighborhood started seeing what was happening at the stockyard, they were not very happy about it. We were ultimately able to get Lancaster Stockyards convicted of cruelty to animals. I went there and took that picture a few years ago. It was being overgrown. It has now been bulldozed. And as part of the cross-country tour, I went to Lancaster. And right next door to the stockyard was a place called the Stockyard Inn, which was, as you can imagine, closely associated with and linked to the stockyard. And so we had a vegan celebration at the Stockyard Inn. And the Stockyard Inn owner said that he learned a lot, and that vegan food is the future, and that from now on he's going to have vegan food on his menu at the Stockyard Inn. So it was a really neat thing to see. And while the stockyard is now gone, Farm Sanctuary has grown. This is our 175-acre farm in Watkins Glen, New York. And for those of you who have not visited, I encourage you to come visit. We do a number of events there. We have bed and breakfast cabins there. Every year, the weekend before Thanksgiving, we have a celebration for the turkeys, where the turkeys are our guests of honor, and we feed them instead of eating them. This year, Ellen DeGeneres is our national spokesperson for the Adopt a Turkey program. We encourage people to adopt turkeys instead of eating them. And if you can't visit the farm and you can't feed the turkeys personally, you can adopt animals that live at the sanctuary. And you get a picture of the turkeys, and you can tell people about the fact that you're saving a turkey instead of eating one. And this is our farm in Orland, California. It's 300 acres. It's north of Sacramento. We also have bed and breakfast cabins there. We do events there. And you're also welcome to visit that sanctuary. For information on any of these, go to our website, farmsanctuary.org, and you're more than welcome to visit. But far away from Farm Sanctuary, on today's farms, bad has become normal. Farm animals are genetically manipulated, artificially bred, mutilated, confined, cruelly beaten, then killed for food. Farm animals are specifically excluded from the Federal Animal Welfare Act. And again, most people would assume and want to believe that there are laws that protect these animals, right? Well, actually not. They're excluded from the Federal Animal Welfare Act. And agricultural practices considered to be common are excluded from most state anti-cruelty laws. And what is a common agricultural practice? It's one that agribusiness decides they want to do. And if enough of them do it, it's common and legal, no matter how cruel it is. And as I alluded to earlier, just to indicate how powerful agribusiness is, it's exempt from many labor and environmental laws. The farm minimum wage is less than the minimum wage in other sectors. I was talking to a guy from the EPA a few days ago, and he talked about how there were certain industries that were basically beyond the law and were exempt from many basic regulations, and it was oil, mining, and agriculture. So bad has become normal on the farms, and they get away with lots of behavior that is outside the bounds of acceptable conduct. After our campaign at Lancaster and our efforts to prevent downed animals from suffering there, I traveled around the country to document downed animals. And this is a picture I took in Southern California, and these are downed cows that are on their way to slaughter to be used for human food. It's a picture I took in Texas of a cow who was sent to the stockyard with her calf, and because they sell to different buyers, they were being separated, and as the mother fought to be with her calf, her neck was broken. And so she was left there for who knows how long. And the reason she was left there and not euthanized was because as long as she was alive, she could still be sold and used for human food. So they did not want to euthanize her for that reason. And here's a picture of a calf I took in upstate New York. He was sent to the stockyard on the day he was born. He was still wet from afterbirth, and he was dying of hypothermia. So I went to the stockyard worker and I said, "What's going on with this calf?" He said, "I got to bury him later today." So I said, "Well, what if I took him off your hands?" He said, "Sure, go ahead, take him." So I took the calf to a veterinarian who tried to get his temperature. It was so low it wouldn't even read on the thermometer. And she said, "What are you wasting your time for? This calf is got little chance of survival. It makes no economic sense. It's going to cost a lot more than it's worth. Why are you wasting your time?" I said, "Well, to me, this calf is not an economic unit. This is an individual. I want to do what I can to help him." So she finally gave him intravenous fluids, and he eventually recovered. And that's Opie. He lived with us for 18 years, and he grew to weigh nearly 3,000 pounds. He was a gentle giant, and it was beautiful to go out to the farm and see him. He was in the barn. We had these 10 by 10 doors in the barn, and when he stood in that door, he occupied the whole space. He was like this tall at the shoulder. But he was gentle, beautiful, beautiful animal. And he died a few years ago, but he lived with us for 18 years. But Opie was born on a dairy farm. And in order for dairy cows to produce milk, they have to have a calf every year. And the calf is taken away from them immediately at birth. And the cow is hooked up to these milk machines, where 2 or 3 times a day and pushed to produce, in some cases, nearly 10 times as much milk than they would normally. So their bodies are under intense stress. And in a healthy environment, a cow could live around 20 years. But on today's modern dairy farms, most of them are sent to slaughter after just about 3 or 4 years in production. And in some cases, they are so worn out that they cannot stand, and those are the downed animals. And that's a picture of a downed cow being dragged onto a truck at a dairy farm. And this picture was actually taken by a dairy industry veterinarian who was upset by what he was seeing. And he took this picture and he sent it to me and said, "This is wrong, this bothers me, we need to stop it." So we have been able to make some progress on preventing the marketing of downed cattle, downed cows. And one of the reasons is because of mad cow disease. And the USDA, finally admitted that we had mad cow disease in the U.S. and that it's more likely to occur in downed cows. And so we were able to prevent downed cows from going into the food supply, which is a good thing. But we are still concerned that downed pigs and downed sheep and goats and other animals too sick to walk are still routinely used for human food. And when we were campaigning and when we actually petitioned the USDA to prevent downed cows in the food supply and all downed animals in the food supply, we argued that these animals were diseased, and diseased animals should not be used for food. Their response to us was that it was legal and common and appropriate for diseased animals to be used for human food. And that remains their position, amazingly.
Shane, can I ask a question?
Sure.
We were talking about this right before, and that's
Yeah.
what I'm going to ask here.
Yeah.
Regarding downed animals, so what our understanding is that if an animal is downed, that a veterinarian has to approve it for slaughter, or is that still the case? What is the status now? I mean, they're not allowed into the food supply at all at this point?
Downed cows are not allowed into the food supply. And I'm talking about USDA federally inspected slaughterhouses. Other downed animals, can still go to USDA slaughterhouses to be approved for human food. Now, if they're downed, they're considered to be suspect animals. So suspect animals need to be looked at by a veterinarian ante-mortem, which is pre-slaughter, and post-mortem. Now, but the veterinarians are not going to do a thorough examination. They basically just look at them and kick them, and if they move, they're alive, and they mainly just want to make sure they're alive. Sometimes they'll take their temperature, but not always. And so it's a very rudimentary, very fast look at them. And when an animal's down, you really can't tell what's ailing them. And after that, they're killed, and then their bodies go into the food supply. They will sometimes look at their organs to make sure there's not drug residues, but it's not a very thorough process. No, and but it's basically the USDA inspection process. And so there is some inspection required, but it's also, these slaughterhouses are moving very fast, and oftentimes veterinarians are pressured to not do very much. I remember when downed cows could go into the food supply, I was at this one slaughterhouse, and these downed cows, laying in this pen, and there's the one USDA veterinarian, he's like this, and he's, probably concerned, and there's like 4 slaughterhouse guys around him saying, come on, come on. And you could just see the body language that this guy didn't feel good about this, but these guys were all kind of pressuring him to say, come on, let's just move it on. And there's a lot of pressure to move these animals through the system without giving much time or consideration to these problems. So back to the dairy, these cows, in order to produce milk and be profitable, have to have a calf every year. And half the calves born are female, and they're raised to become milking cows. The other half the cows born are male. And because they're never going to produce milk, and they've not been thought of highly as beef animals, the veal industry was actually created to take advantage of all these unwanted male calves born on dairy farms. And that's how veal calves are raised. They're taken from their mothers at birth, chained by the neck in these small wooden crates, and that's how they live their whole lives. Now, as people have learned about veal production techniques, they have been appalled. And veal consumption in our country has dropped significantly in the past couple decades, and that's a very positive sign, and it indicates that when people hear about this, they don't support it. But veal calves are not the only animals that are confined. That's a picture I took in Missouri of some sows in gestation crates. These are called gestation crates because this is where they're kept during their gestation period or their pregnancy, which lasts about 4 months. And these are the pigs that are producing the piglets that are raised to be killed. Right before giving birth, they're put into a similarly confining crate called a farrowing crate. And the sow still has only 2 feet of space like they do here, but there's some additional space on the side for the piglets, so that when the mother stands up and lays down, when she lays on her side, the piglets can nurse through the bars. And they'll be kept in those crates for about 3 weeks. The piglets will be taken away to be fattened for slaughter, usually killed at about 6 months old. And right when the piglets are taken away, the mother is re-impregnated, put right back into the gestation crate. So she lives a constant cycle of impregnation, birth, and re-impregnation, always confined in a 2-foot wide space. These are very intelligent animals, they're very sensitive animals, and they suffer both physical and psychological disorders in these conditions. See, this one has some bruising on her front leg. They also oftentimes have sores on their shoulders from constantly scraping against the metal bars. They're also basically driven mad and engage in neurotic coping behaviors like bar biting in these cages. And they'll live about 3 years in these kinds of conditions before they're no longer profitable, and they'll be then sent to slaughter and used for low-grade meat products. There was a campaign we ran a number of years ago in Minnesota at a stockyard where we were trying to prevent downed pigs and other sick animals from going into the food supply. And there was this one pen they called the pizza pen, where they had a lot of these worn-out sows. And they called it the pizza pen because they were going to be killed and used for pepperoni. And the other confinement system I'll mention are battery cages. This is how egg-laying hens are kept in small wire cages that are lined up in rows, stacked in tiers in huge factory warehouses that'll hold 100,000 birds. They're packed so tightly they can't even stretch their wings. Each bird is given less space than a sheet of paper, about 2/3 the size of a sheet of paper to live their whole life on. They're constantly scraping against the wire bars. Their feathers wear off. They have bruises and abrasions on their bodies. And then they're killed after about a year of this. Now, in the egg industry today, or in the poultry industry, I should say, there are two distinct birds, or just 2 distinct strains of birds. There are the meat-type birds, and there are the egg-type birds. The meat-type birds have been genetically bred to grow twice as big and twice as fast as normal. The egg-type birds have been genetically bred to put all of their feed energy into egg production. So at the hatchery, but they all hatch at the same kind of place, and this is what one of the hatcheries look like. And if these chicks are the meat-type bird, both the males and females will be used for meat production. But if these chicks are being hatched for egg production, half of them are male. And they will not grow fast enough to be raised profitably for meat. They'll never lay eggs. So they're literally thrown away and killed the day they hatch. And that's a dumpster, a picture I took behind a hatchery in Pennsylvania, and it was full of dead and dying unwanted male chicks born at this hatchery. And here's a picture from another hatchery in Pennsylvania, and this is a manure spreader, where these are unwanted male chicks literally being spread on the field like manure. And they were alive in this manure spreader. You could hear them chirping. And here's the picture I took at an egg factory in New Jersey. And here we have a trash can full of dead birds. I had gone into this particular egg factory to take pictures of the battery cages, which I did. And as I was getting ready to leave, I saw this trash can. So I came up to it, took a picture, and I noticed some of the birds in it were alive and moving. So we took them out of the trash can and brought them to the sanctuary, and we took care of them. And then we tried to prosecute this egg factory for cruelty to animals, for leaving live birds in a trash can. And their lawyer argued in court that they could legally treat the birds like manure. And the judge said, "Isn't there a difference between live birds and manure?" And their attorney said, "No, there's not a difference." And they were found not guilty of cruelty to animals. There was another case in California where an egg farmer had 30,000 spent hens. After they're no longer profitable, they call them spent hens. And the slaughterhouses didn't want them because, again, these are very skinny birds. And time is money. They don't want to waste time killing these skinny birds when they can get these big, heavy meat-type birds. So a lot of times now, these egg factories have a hard time getting rid of these spent hens. And that was the case in California. So this guy had 30,000 spent hens. And he didn't know what he was going to do with them. So what he did, and it's very gruesome, he got a wood chipper. And he threw the live birds in the wood chipper to kill them. And A neighbor saw this, was appalled, contacted us and others, and we tried to get them prosecuted for cruelty to animals, but they were ultimately found not guilty of cruelty to animals. And one of the experts that came forward to defend this practice as a common and acceptable agricultural practice was a veterinarian with the American Veterinary Medical Association, who actually sat on the Animal Welfare Committee of the American Veterinary Medical Association. And I just want to tip my hat here to Holly Cheever, who's a veterinarian who's been wrestling with the AVMA for years on these issues.
And tried to get Greg Cutler's ass off the welfare committee, but didn't work.
So it's tough. So you have these institutions that basically support this kind of abuse. And there's a quote that I think is very fitting by Ruth Harrison in Animal Machines. If one person is unkind to an animal, it's considered to be cruelty. But where a lot of people are unkind to animals, especially in the name of commerce, the cruelty is condoned, and once large sums of money are at stake, will be defended to the last by otherwise intelligent people. So we have a situation where bad has become normal, where everybody's doing it, so it must be okay. But I think it's important to step back and look at the facts and then ultimately make our own decisions and not do things just because we have been doing them and not do things just because everybody's doing them, because that has tended to get our species into a lot of problems in various circumstances. Now, the last production method I'll mention are the meat-type chickens, and I've said it already, but these birds have been genetically bred to go twice as big and twice as fast as normal. And that type of growth rate and their overweight conditions is a very negative for their health, as you can imagine. And every year, hundreds of millions of these birds die of heart attacks before even reaching the slaughterhouse. But it's still profitable for the industry because they raise over 9 billion of these meat-type chickens every year. So they can lose hundreds of millions, and it's still profitable because they're growing twice as fast as normal. And these birds' overweight condition and their early deaths and their suffering they experience somewhat perversely parallels our own health problems in this country, and specifically I'm referring now to obesity. And I've got a series of slides here from the Centers for Disease Control indicating obesity trends in the U.S. This is from 1985, and the darker blue colors indicate 10 to 14% of the adult population considered to be obese. By 1990, we see the number of states in the dark blue increasing and spreading. By 1995, we have a new darker blue color indicating a higher percentage of people who have obesity problems. 2000, we have a new color indicating the problem continuing to get worse. And this last slide I have available, 2006, we have a whole new color indicating that this problem just keeps spreading. So what we're doing to these animals and the way we're eating has consequences, including for our own health. And it does not have to be this way. It is not normal to have to take Lipitor. It is not normal to suffer the way we do in this country with these health problems. And it's upsetting to look at how much money is being made on illness and on heart disease and so on. Could you imagine if we cut our heart disease rates in half, what that would do to the pharmaceutical business? It would shift things a little bit. And the pharmaceutical industry also is very engaged in making money on selling drugs to agribusiness. More than half of the antibiotics sold in the U.S. are used in farm animal production. And these make the animals grow faster and keep them alive in these filthy conditions. So this is an industry that is intensely drug dependent on the front end and on the back end. And it doesn't have to be that way. If we lived well and ate whole plant foods instead of animal foods and stayed away from processed junk, sugar and things like that, we could change our lives, and people do. There are people who have had huge health problems, and they've shifted to eating whole foods, plant-based diet, and their health and their lives have changed in a very positive way. The other thing that happens, though, when we abuse animals is not only do we suffer physically, I would say that we suffer emotionally and maybe even spiritually. Human beings have empathy. And that is one of the most important human characteristics. When we see somebody else suffer, we feel it. We sympathize and empathize with the other who is in pain. To work in a slaughterhouse where you're killing animals one after the other, you got to cut off that empathy. When you're working in factory farms, you have to cut off that empathy. And then you also start telling yourself stories and rationalizing and saying, it's okay to do this. These animals are here for that purpose. Or, you just start seeing the world in a very narrow way. And, one of the first visitors to our farm in Watkins Glen, New York, was a pig farmer. And he went into the pig barn, and he saw some young volunteers taking care of these 500-pound sows. And he was genuinely worried about their welfare. He said, those are dangerous, violent, aggressive animals. You better get out of that barn, otherwise they'll attack you. And I told him that, we did not have the experience of these animals attacking us. I said they sometimes come in and they're afraid, but we give them their space and we treat them with respect, and they come to understand they're in a safe place, and they never attack us the way you're describing. And he said, look, I'm a pig farmer. I understand these animals. I've raised them for years. They're violent and aggressive animals. You better get out of there. And he went and he told a story to illustrate his point. He said he had this sow once, and she had piglets, and then he took her piglets away, and he came after her. And he didn't put together that his action caused her response. He felt so entitled to taking her piglets. He felt they're there for him and didn't even consider that she had an interest in their well-being. So we start losing perspective on many things when we behave in certain ways and we start rationalizing and validating behavior that is violent. And animal farming is inherently violent. So when you're taking the piglets away from these animals and they want to save them, what's the response? You say they're violent and aggressive animals, and then you put them in crates. And then you have to put them in crates because you justify it by saying they're violent and aggressive animals. If we don't put them in the crates, they're going to attack us. And then it goes further. The assumption is that these are violent animals, and they will attack each other, and the mothers cannot raise their young. There's actually industry people who believe and often say, we put them in the farrowing crate with their piglets because if we don't, they're going to injure and kill their young. So what happens when one of these sows escapes a crate and is pregnant? That happened in Iowa a couple years ago when the floods came. And, many animals died in the crates, but some escaped. And one was a pig that we now have, who we named Nikki, who was pregnant. She escaped. She got on a levee, and she gave birth, and she nursed her piglets and raised them on her own. And we came and we picked up Nikki, brought her to the sanctuary, and when we go into the barn, do you think she attacks us? When animals are treated kindly, they respond in kind. And, cruelty to animals is bad for the animals, but is also bad for us. And it's a wonderful thing to walk around the farm and to see animals smiling and enjoying the sun and enjoying the beauty of nature and enjoying themselves. And as they do that, we can empathize with that too, and we can share that instead of the violence of factory farming. And the animals build nests. They get to be who they are. So putting animals behind bars is terrible for the animals. It's terrible for the environment. It's terrible for us, physically as well as emotionally. So I think what's important now is for us to be citizens, not just consumers. We need to think about what we're doing. We should not just eat meat and dairy and eggs and so on because that's what we do, because that's what we learn to do, because that's what we know how to do. We should eat in a way that makes sense, and we should just think about what makes sense. And everybody has to make their own choices. But I would encourage people to make choices that are aligned with our own values, so we don't have to say, I don't want to know. So instead we can say, I know exactly where my food came from and I feel good about it. And there's great things happening now. There's farmers markets where you can go get great produce. There's pick your own operations. There's community gardening. A lot of great ways to get good, healthy food now. And we also should eat food that's aligned with our interests. Each person has to make their own decision about this, but I would encourage people to make choices aligned with our values and aligned with our interests. So I think what's important is for us to be citizens, not just consumers. And here's some quotes I like. Each snowflake in an avalanche pleads not guilty. Everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself. How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. And there's a lot of things in this world that are outside of our control, and we can feel disempowered. There's wars happening, there's rainforests being cut down, there's lots of things that are not in our hands and are pretty far away. But when it comes to what we eat, each of us every day can make choices about what we eat. And that choice has profound consequences for our own health, as well as for animals, and for the environment, and for the future of our planet. And so I would just, again, encourage people to think about those choices. And by making choices that we feel good about and that are healthy, it's a very empowering experience. That's why us vegans can be so enthusiastic about this lifestyle. And here's a great quote from Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever does. And to that, the Animals at Farm Sanctuary say thank you for your time, and please come visit us. So thank you all very much.
I'm sure some of you have questions for Jean, so let it happen. Deb?
I was wondering if Jean could talk about the gentleman that told the story about being a big factory farmer with cows and what happened to him.
Howard Lyman.
Yeah.
What the cows, the food being sprayed and,
Yes.
him and his brother came down with cancer.
Right. Yes, you're referring to Howard Lyman, who wrote a book called Mad Cowboy. He was actually on the Oprah Winfrey Show back in the 1990s and talked about how we might have mad cow disease in this country and how we were feeding dead cows to live cows. And Oprah said, "You just stopped me cold from eating another burger." And then the Texas cattle rancher sued her. And so she had to defend her case, and she moved to Texas to defend herself while she was filming her show. But Howard grew up on a small farm in Montana, and he went to the university and learned about professional, agribusiness, and started getting into very much chemical-oriented farming. He had a feedlot, had lots and lots of cattle, and had a lot of money coming in. But he saw around him that the birds were dying, that the environment was being destroyed, and then his brother got very sick, and I believe died. And then Howard also got sick, and he had a big tumor on his spine. And he was close to being paralyzed, but thankfully he pulled through, and he made a pledge that he was going to work to raise awareness and to challenge this system. So he's now a vegan advocate, and he's out there talking about the harms of this industrial farming model and about the fact that we do not need to eat animals to live. So he had a very first-hand experience and an encounter with the harms that come directly from these chemical inputs. And that's the whole thing I didn't even get into, is the chemical inputs. And with the antibiotics that are used, you have antibiotic-resistant bacteria that are getting into the environment, getting into the groundwater near some factory farms. And then when people are infected with E. coli or salmonella that is resistant to these antibiotics, and we try to treat them, the antibiotics don't work. MRSA, which has been in the press a fair bit lately, has its origin in animal farming. And so there's a lot of diseases that are emerging from this factory farming system, which is basically a perfect breeding ground for disease.
It seems like the dedication to ending factory farming and concern for the welfare of these factory farm animals could be interpreted possibly as an advocacy for smaller animal-based farms and backyard chickens and more humane local meat. How do you respond to that?
The way we define factory farming at Farm Sanctuary is an attitude that commodifies sentient life and the natural world. And with that definition, if the animals are being killed to be eaten, they're factory farms. But we're at a time now where there's... What's that?
It seems rather self-serving to find it that way.
Self-serving? How so? Well, yeah,
You're you're a vegan. So
I am.
You're obviously against eating animals.
I am.
So to you.
Well, that's how we define it. Well, let me say a little more about this, but okay, that's all right. But so factory farming, a large part of this really is about the relationship. Is it one of kindness or is it one of exploitation? And with more awareness about factory farming, and I think with YouTube and with the internet and with lots of opportunity to learn about what is happening on these industrial factory farms, people don't want to participate. They don't want to support veal crates or those kind of things. So what is happening is we now have a shift away from that, and in some cases it's towards eating more plants, and in some cases going vegan. In other cases, people are buying animal foods from farms that are treating the animals not as badly. Now, this is good and bad. It's good in that there's an awareness, and people are purchasing and moving away from the factory farming system, but they're still buying animal foods from farms that in many cases are not as good as the labels would lead people to believe. A lot of free-range animal foods come from what I would consider factory farms, where you will have thousands of animals in a warehouse, and they're technically given access to the outdoors, which is required for free range. But access could mean a small door that goes to a crummy little paddock, and that's free range. That's access to the outdoors. So, and one of the big problems in this whole realm is that the demand for these non-factory farmed animal foods is so strong and the supply cannot meet it, so that you have this pressure on retailers to provide the product and to not necessarily look as closely or have as much oversight on the production techniques as the consumers expect or assume exists. So we have, I think, right now, we're at a time of change where there's awareness and people shifting away from supporting factory farming because people don't like it. But you also have, I think, some animal foods that are being sold and represented to be raised a lot more humanely than they really are being raised. And at the end of the day, for me, we don't need to eat animal foods. I think the best solution is plant-based living. But I also understand that different people are going to have different opinions. And I think it's healthy for there to be different opinions. Benjamin Franklin said, if everybody thinks the same way, nobody's thinking. So it's good for there to be exchanges and different opinions. I welcome that. And I speak to industry groups, too, about the efficiency of plant farming as opposed to animal farming. I speak to pork producer groups, dairy groups, and I open up by saying that I respect farmers. Farmers work hard. Farmers grow food and feed people. That's very admirable. But the key question is, what is the most efficient way for farmers to feed the world? Is it by growing grains and feeding those grains to animals, raising the animals, and then killing the animals? Or is it by growing plant foods and eating those directly? And I say all the evidence suggests that it's by growing plant foods and eating those directly. I was going back and forth with this one group in Florida a number of years ago, and I kept saying, plant farming is the most efficient way to feed the world. And they kept coming back and saying, no, industrial animal farming is the best way to feed the world, the most efficient way. And I finally said to them, where are you guys getting your information about this animal farming being efficient? It's completely counter to everything I've ever heard or read. And they told me the name of the book they were getting it from. It's called Saving the Planet with Pesticides and Plastics. And that was really the name of the book. And I got a copy of it, written by a guy named Dennis Avery from the Hudson Institute. But anyway, but there's not enough vegan farming going on right now. And that's a challenge. And I try to buy organic produce. But even there, it's oftentimes grown with meat and bone meal and fish meal and blood meal and feather meal. So one could even say, is that really vegan? And I also should just say that I'm a vegan, I wear no leather, but these are probably petroleum shoes from Payless, right? I mean, they're from Payless, I know that. I'm guessing they're petroleum. They're probably not the healthiest, best shoes. So I just want to say that none of us is perfect. We just each, I think, need to continue to strive to be better And if somebody's eating meat, perhaps to eat less meat. And for myself, I've had these shoes a long time, so that's one defense of the shoe. But also I'm trying to eat healthier. And I think it's important to be good examples of living well. And so, when I wrote my book in 2008, I was out talking about it, and people would say, well, what do you eat? And I would say, I take noodles, I put them on a plate with margarine, and I zap it in the microwave. That's what I would eat. Not real healthy, not real appetizing sounding. So I started trying to do better in terms of what I eat. And I make these green smoothies now. I still do the noodles once in a while, but I make these green smoothies now where I take kale and spinach, and I put it in a blender with bananas and blueberries and flaxseed and some kind of non-dairy milk like soy milk or rice milk or oat milk, and blend that up. And if I wanted sweeter, I'll throw dates in there. And that's a healthy, nutritious, tasty, meal. And so just trying to eat well and live well. It's important to do that. And I'm exercising more, playing ultimate frisbee, which I totally love.
And you
like
ran
that.
a marathon. I
ran a half marathon. I'm signed up to do a marathon next year.
All
yeah,
right.
So yeah, do that before I turn 50, hopefully. We'll see. I'm sorry. Okay, the point is, without farm animals on farms, then some of these species of farm animals might stop existing? Is that kind of the point? That sort of thing? Well, there's certain species of farm animals that probably would be better if they didn't exist. I mean, modern turkeys have been so profoundly altered that they cannot even reproduce naturally anymore. All these commercial turkeys are products of artificial insemination. They've been genetically bred to have such large breasts, because breast meat is the most profitable, that they cannot mount and reproduce naturally. So, and they're so heavy, their feet and legs have a hard time supporting their bodies. They have heart trouble. That species really be better if they didn't exist, because their lives are short and painful. Other species of animals, such as cattle, are not native to North America. So my long-term view would be that these animals should be repatriated into their native lands. And the only native farm animal in North America is the turkey. All the others have been imported. So instead of cattle running around the middle of this country, you'd have bison running around the middle of this country. And that is kind of starting to happen a little bit with, you have Ted Turner, who's raising them to kill and eat, which I'm not crazy about. But perhaps at some point, those more wild type species like the bison or some of these heritage breeds of turkeys, for example, could eventually just be let go and let wild. So that's kind of my long-term view. So I think we will always have animals, and it kind of boils down to what is our relationship with these animals. And to what extent should they be domesticated or wild is another bigger question. But if we're breeding them just to exploit them, that's where I am not thinking it's a good thing. If we are living with them in a mutually beneficial situation, it's about the relationship. Is it a mutually beneficial thing or not? And there's a lot of people that would argue that having farm animals on farms is mutually beneficial because we're saving them for the predators. But we're doing that so we can kill them and eat them. There was that funny thing on Colbert where there was a guy, it was Ducks Unlimited or something like this, and he was saying he's a conservationist, he wants to protect the ducks. And the commentator says, so you're going to protect the ducks, why? So we can go hunt them. So you're protecting them to kill them. So it's that kind of thing, like what is the intent and what is the relationship at the end of the day? And is it one of compassion and sort of mutual benefit, or is it one of exploitation, which, when it comes to farm animals, it generally means they get killed and eaten. Now I'm talking long term about repatriating animals into their native places. In the short term, I think, I would love to see farms turn into sanctuaries, and I know that's kind of a pipe dream perhaps for many folks, but if there's a farmer that has, say, 30 cows and he's ready to retire and he's not sure, he'd rather not kill these cows, it'd be beautiful if they could stay on that land and that could somehow become a sanctuary. There's a lot of practical challenges with that, but those are the types of things that could happen bit by bit, I think. Yeah.
What is your vision of what would happen
Yeah. Yes. Well, what's interesting about industrial animal agriculture is that it's not actually creating lots of good jobs. It's creating crummy, low-paying, dangerous jobs. And my vision of agriculture is less capital-intensive and more labor-intensive, where instead of having these massive factory farms with equipment and machinery doing a lot of the stuff, you would have and massive tractors, or where they're moving around by GPS, and they're spraying pesticides with planes. That's how they do it now, where you're disconnected from the land. I would instead like to see more small community-based agriculture, community farms, where it's more labor-intensive, people on the farm working, using some equipment, but not these massive things. And I think more jobs could come from that type of community-based small farm agriculture. And in addition to just the growing side of it, there could be value-added products, there could be crafts, there could be, canning, there could be artisanal kind of stuff. There could be an ecotourism aspect. There could be a pick-your-own berries type of thing. There could be bed and breakfasts. There could be, corn mazes, all this type of stuff. You got that right. Exactly. But it's starting to happen. It is starting to happen. If you look, there are more farmers markets now than ever before. Some farms, in order to stay in business, are going into CSAs, community-supported agriculture programs. But we're talking about a big shift. It's a fundamental shift, and it's based on a different kind of relationship with the land, but also with our neighbors and with animals. And there's something called veganic agriculture that is now very new, but picking up. And it's one where you are growing food and you're not using animals to, in any domestic animals in any way, but you're there and there are going to be wild animals. And you've got to interact in a way with them and in as a non-invasive, non-violent way as possible. So this is not perfect. It's not black and white. It's a challenge. Yeah.
I have a thought to that one thing that people forget when they get into fear about thinking about an industry to change is historically so many industries in the United States have phased out.
Yeah.
The desire to survive, people find something to engage in, and if this destructive manner of lifestyle has changed, people would probably be opened up to finding a more blessed lifestyle.
I think that's a really good point. Yeah, change is the only constant is change, as has been said, and certain businesses over time, cease and then new ones begin. And I think this animal farming business is an inherently violent, wasteful, inefficient system. And one of the reasons it's allowed to exist is because of the subsidies and the cheap, the tax money that bolsters the cheap feed and also helps clean up the messes. And the externalities are not calculated in. The healthcare costs, the environmental destruction, our desire and need for cheap oil. These are all costs that are connected in some way to animal agriculture. Did you have a, yeah.
Regarding veal and the decreased
Yeah.
consumption and desire for veal, how is that related to dairy consumption right now? Like, is dairy consumption actually dropping? And if it isn't, what's happening with the milk?
Okay, yeah. The point has to do with veal consumption, and I mentioned how veal consumption has dropped when people have seen these crates and don't like to support it. And the question has to do with how does that affect dairy production, and is that changing at all, and what's happening to these calves if they're not being used for veal, these male calves? Well, the dairy industry is still going at it's still growing, still more milk being produced, and one of the reasons for that is because a lot of it is now being turned into cheese. It takes a lot of milk to produce cheese, just like it takes a lot of grain to produce meat. So it's inefficient, but there's a lot of milk still being produced, and the cows are being pushed to produce more milk. So actually the number of cows in our country has been going down, while the amount of milk being produced has been going up, because the cows are being pushed harder and harder than ever. But you still have millions of unwanted male calves that are born on these dairy farms every year, and you have this veal industry that is becoming pinched and is not putting the animals in crates as much. So what has happened now is a lot of these unwanted male calves are being used for beef production. And so if you go to feedlots out in California, which is actually the #1 dairy state, you will see these Holsteins, these black and white Holstein steers, the neutered males, that are now being raised for beef. So that's what's happening.
Can I just say something here? I'm surprised, Gene, that frankly you didn't have more graphic, and I'm not trying to be funny. I'm just, you know, what my students have seen is the fact that 400 animals are slaughtered an hour on a farm. That amounts to 7 per minute. That's 1 animal every 10 seconds. Many of these animals are still conscious. I love your presentation. Don't get me wrong. I think it's more mild than even reality. I mean, the horrors on these factory farms, we can never forget. These male chicks that are thrown away as discards, that chickens and poultry are not even protected by the Humane Slaughter Act. They're fully conscious when they're scalded. I mean, these are the things. And you're the expert here, but I also believe what really speaks to people is seeing the ugly stuff.
Yeah.
And I just need to say that for more information on this topic, there's some really stuff that will turn you around. Gene's presentation is fabulous, but there's more behind the scenes that he hasn't even shown.
Right.
And I'm kind of interested why. Do you feel that it's not something...
Well, this is something I show. This presentation is sort of a general introduction, touches on it. I mentioned the hens being ground up alive in the wood chipper. So I do touch on it as an example of how bad it is. But... I try to be hopeful too.
You have to be.
I guess that's a big part of it
there's
as well.
It's a balancing act.
But like you say, it's the animals are cut up alive at slaughterhouses, scalded alive at slaughterhouses, and it's gruesome. I mean, this is an inherently violent business.
Very violent and brutal.
Yeah.
I'd like to respond. My friend invited me to come in a class, and I think that it was very wise not to. Yeah, just because we talked originally about people who are in denial. That's going to turn them off, saying that. I told her I'd leave if it got too gory, and
well, thanks for.
I think that was wise.
Well, thanks for staying. Well, it's one of these. These are There's a book out called Change of Heart. A friend of mine wrote, and it says what psychology can tell us about social change. And sometimes, these images and this reality is so difficult that, and sometimes people, when they see it, are just so in shock and just want to turn away. So I think, making it accessible and saying, hey, it's bad, but still creating a space for people to then, and hope, yeah. So, but it's hard to know. I mean, different people respond to different things.
Is the cage-free egg thing a hoax?
Is the cage-free egg thing a hoax? I would say if it says cage-free, they are cage-free, but I would also say that those conditions are probably not very good, and that the hens are probably debeaked, because they're crowded, and they debeak them so they don't peck each other, and that happens in the battery cages. It happens in a free range or a cage-free operation and in a free range operation. So I wouldn't say it's a hoax, but I would say that cage-free is not humane still.
Well, just the endpoint is always the same slaughter. So cage-free, yes, they don't have cages, but they're still packed together. There's no chance to do all the social things that this complex social animal does, and at the end, they still are going to be scalded alive and ripped apart and be conscious throughout the whole disemboweling that they go through.
Yeah.
No, cage-free is not humane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any statistics that state how many animals' lives would be saved if even one person decided to become a
Yeah.
vegetarian or vegan?
Yeah, there's a book out called 95 that indicates that for each person that becomes a vegan, they save 95 animals a year. Now, the majority of those are fish, and I didn't even talk about fish. So that's a whole other situation. But so, in terms of land animals, it's about 30 a year that the average American eats. And most of those are chickens, because chickens are small. Whereas with cows, they weigh, over 1,000 pounds. So when you eat beef, you're eating part of one animal. If you're eating chicken, you're probably eating the whole bird. they cut off, not the whole beak, but they cut off like the last 1/3 of it. But it would still be very hard for them to eat in a natural situation because, their beak is a very important part of their body. It's how they explore their world with their beak. But in these factory farms, they have these troughs of grain in front of them, so they're just taking big bites of it. It's, which is not how they would normally they would eat in a more discerning way with their beak. But on these factory farms, they have these troughs of grain. They just get mouthfuls of it.
A lot of them starve.
And
They do it in the wrong way.
And many of them starve, too. When they're debeaked, it hurts. And some die from the debeaking because they do this with a hot cauterizing blade, and they just like burn off the end of their beak, basically. And then sometimes they get neuromas, and they get problems on there. So, yeah.
You're based in America, obviously. Do you see struggles with moving this whole revolution globally to possibly third world countries where cattle are, say, their sole source of food? Or have you found struggles with that? Have you tried to move globally?
Well, we're focused mainly on the U.S. because that's where factory farming is really one of the biggest problems. That's where we're located, and we think it's important to clean up our own house. But I am very concerned about what's happening internationally. Generally what happens is as countries become wealthier, they tend to eat more animal foods. And of course, agribusiness sees this as a huge opportunity to now export to China and India and to encourage those countries to grow more of these animal foods. And that is appearing to be happening now. And it's a strange situation. It's hard to exactly understand it, but my belief is that it kind of plays into bigger issues of power and control. When you're eating meat, it indicates that you're wealthy and more powerful and influential. And so I am concerned about this trend to export the wrong kind of revolution. Because in other countries, most countries with long-standing traditions are based on mainly plant consumption. If you look at Indian food or Chinese food or Ethiopian food, it's very plant-heavy with maybe some meat as a condiment. But, and that's traditionally how people have lived. But we're pushing this whole meat idea all over the world. And it's based on beliefs that are not necessarily accurate, that meat makes you strong. Not so. I mean, some of the best athletes have trained and done extremely well as vegans. Carl Lewis, when he did his best times, he's the Olympic gold medalist, he did his best times as a vegan. Dave Scott, the guy who's won the Ironman triathlon more than anybody else, did that as a vegan. The Ironman triathlon is like you swim 2.5 miles and then you bike 112 miles, and then you run a marathon, and it's a race. So a vegan is the guy who won that more than anybody else. And so there's other vegan athletes as well. Yeah.
I came as a guest of my daughter, and you've really caught my imagination with your statement that plants are better than animals. Basically.
To consume, yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
very tired, sorry.
It's okay, don't worry.
Vocabulary shot today.
It's okay.
But your vision, and you speak to, having spoken to all of these different agriculture, agribusiness groups, have you managed to convert any farmers? And how are they doing?
Yeah, no,
Because
well,
I can see your point, because we're raising the plants to feed the animals and then eating the animals, it's kind of wasteful.
right, yes.
Okay, I can see that. I'm still not too ready to give up my beef yet.
Okay, well, I appreciate you being here and thinking about it at least, yeah.
For a farmer to switch over,
Yeah,
have you managed to win any converts at all?
right across the
How are
street.
they doing?
Yeah, well, right across the street from us in Watkins Glen is a veganic farm, actually. A veganic farm.
Right next to home is a pretty good
That's a good way to do it. And they sell their produce at the Ithaca Farmers Market. It's called Unexpected Farms. And we're in the midst of a farming movement now, and change is hard. So if somebody's been on a dairy farm or on a beef farm, and that's what they know, and if they've invested everything they have in it, it's tough to change. But what I say to those folks is that, look, I would start transitioning by maybe putting a few acres into apple trees or into something else. Change is going to happen incrementally. But I've been at some of these, like the National Pork Board had me speak to some USDA agriculture extension agents. And after I talked, one of them came up to me and said that, my daughter's a vegan. And another one came up and said, yeah, my cousin's a vegan. So even in that world, there are people that are thinking about these issues. But change will happen incrementally. And there are some examples of new farms that are setting up and are plant-based. And there's farmers markets popping up all over the place. And those are indications, I think, of the kind of change that is happening. Yeah.
I think kind of to follow on that a little bit, I personally converted to vegetarianism, but it took me like 2 years to get there. And I come from a meat eating family. I don't know anyone else who does eat meat in my circle of family and friends. My colleagues, my family, my friends, it's not like I advertise it, but it does come up, and I don't want to be pretentious about it, but it's viewed as odd by a lot of people, and I was just wondering what I am so caught off guard when people make judgments, because I try not to judge what other people eat, that I don't really know how to respond. I usually just am so dumbfounded that I don't know what to say. So what, for someone who's vegan and has been that way for a long time, you talk to people about possibly converting or doing what's important to you, what would you suggest is a good way to kind of respond to people who are judging you constantly?
Right.
Not understanding, even if you don't make it a point to advertise that.
Yeah, well, being vegan is, it's a statement. It's a statement of conscience, a statement of responsibility, and it's one that sort of causes people to evaluate maybe some of their own thinking or their behavior. And most people want to see themselves as humane and responsible. And being vegan, that's, I think, an embodiment of that, being humane and responsible. And so I think people then feel a little bit nervous about it and sometimes will try to denigrate it and say, well, that's crazy, or I could never do that, or it's impossible, we've never done that. We've always eaten meat. And we grow up in a system, a belief system, where it's considered to be normal to eat meat and eat animals. And if you don't do it, you're weird. But if you grew up in the south of the U.S. and didn't have slaves or said it was wrong, you'd have been considered weird. The abolitionists were called all kinds of names when they started speaking out against that injustice. And, it just takes time for we're social animals, and bad becomes normal. And people grow up with beliefs. And, the world used to be flat. At least that's what a lot of people believed. A lot of people used to believe that all the stars or the whole solar system revolved around the Earth. And then we realized, no, it doesn't. We revolve around the sun, and the sun is part of this whole bigger thing. So it's just a different perspective shift. And I think when people are critical, it's just because they haven't really thought very much about it, or because they feel a little bit defensive or intimidated, or and just nervous. And sometimes when people are nervous, they'll say things that they don't really know what to say. It's like, what do I say to a vegan? I don't know. So it's tough. But I think just being understanding and recognizing that people are fragile and people are all imperfect, but also people want to see themselves as humane and want to do good for the most part. People want to do good. So I think you want to play a role in supporting any positive shift. So if somebody says, I'm not going to eat veal anymore, I support that. I say, that's great. And for each positive thing somebody does, I will be happy about it. And I try to focus on the good things that are happening and encourage those. And, if somebody wants to talk about the other stuff, I'm more than happy to do it. But, you want to let people kind of make their own choices. And you just got to be a good, it's tough. And especially where social animals, to be the only vegetarian in an audience is tough. Or when everybody else is on the other side, that is tough. So I think just getting with other animal people and vegetarians and just sort of having that social support and just sort of talking through how do you deal with this situation, how do you deal with that, could be good. But just understanding that, people are sometimes just nervous, and they're not necessarily being mean. They're just uneasy about how to deal with these vegans. Yeah.
I've tried like 100 times to become a vegetarian, and my biggest problem is feeling tired constantly.
Hmm.
I constantly feel tired. And I wonder if it's because I've stopped eating meat, or if it's not that I'm getting the right things because of the wrong intake of food.
Well, you know, our minds are very powerful things, and we've grown up believing you need to eat meat to feel a certain way. And so I think sometimes when we shift, you know, our brains still might have certain beliefs that can cause us to feel certain ways. And also, when sometimes you change how you eat, you know, going vegetarian or vegan isn't necessarily healthy. You could always eat potato chips and Coke, and that's vegan, right? So just eating well is important. You know, eating whole foods, eating organic foods, eating foods as close to nature as possible, going to farmers markets, things like that. But I think that, you know, it's great that you tried, but I would just say, you know, more variety of foods might be an answer. We'll keep on. Well, and maybe if there's like a local vegetarian group, you can get with folks there. There's a lot of vegan nutritionists now. There's a lot of information online, things like that.
Yeah, Gene, just like you're saying, to reinforce that, it's pretty difficult to be a vegan out there in the world on your own, especially when you're on your own. It's a lot easier today than it was 20 years ago, for sure. But for those who are struggling with, you know, veganism or vegan ideas, there's nothing better, more enlightening, empowering, emboldening to be part of a group. And just to I'm going to put somebody on the spot, Claire Henderson is here from the Albany Capital District meetup. We're having a vegan meetup this Wednesday night.
Cool.
They do a vegan meetup once a month. You can see Claire for information on that. Mary and I are here from the Berkshire Vegetarian Network. We cover southern Vermont, all western Mass, and we are involved in lots of vegan events, including an upcoming vegan Thanksgiving on Thanksgiving Day. There's a representative from X's to O's Vegan Bakery. It's on a vegan brunch in Troy, right here in Troy. So there's a couple of us back here that people can talk to.
That's great.
Things that are happening in the area.
Now, thanks for that.
That's
No, we're
awesome.
social animals. We need to be supported.
In our animal law class, the chapter on factory farming spoke a lot about Temple Grandin. And I personally found it quite offensive because it was more of a feeling that this was a really good thing. And I was just curious what your opinion is.
Yeah, question is, what's my opinion about Temple Grandin? Now, some of you probably know many of you probably know who she is. She's an autistic woman who's worked a lot with the meat industry to design slaughter facilities so the animals move through them more efficiently with less stress. And, you know, I think Temple actually cares about animals, interestingly enough. I think she has a genuine concern about their welfare. And actually, in one of her books, she talked about wanting to be vegetarian. So my hope is that at some point, when she retires, Temple will become a vegetarian, become a spokesperson. That's my hope. Now, I'm a dreamer, and I realize that some of my dreams aren't going to come true. But that one might. You never know. I think that, again, it's complicated. With a lot of this stuff, it's not black and white. It's not good and bad. It's a little of both. She has done some things to lessen some stress and strain. But she's also made killing animals faster and more efficient. She is very aligned with agribusiness and has been one of their spokespeople. But she also has spoken out against certain bad things. You know, she will, if there's an egregious cruelty, she will say that's wrong. She's spoken out against gestation crates. So she is in a position where she has influence, and she's used some of that influence to prevent some suffering. But she's also used her designing techniques to make killing animals much more efficient. So that's kind of just a description of what she does. Now, what's my opinion of it? Gosh, hard to say. It's too early to really know what the long-term impact of this is all going to be. I think she has lessened suffering in the near term. And so it's probably a net good. But it's a process. And I don't like that any animals are being killed, you know, but I think that it's still not... It's not good, but it's maybe less bad, would be, in some ways. It may be a better way to say it. Yeah.
Just a quick thought and a question. Like, the quick thought being that most truly sustainable, people have known since the beginning of time that like a whole grain of legume is a complete protein.
Yeah, well, agribusiness is very influential in Washington, D.C., and Albany, and state capitals everywhere. And so, we do what we can to try to shift policies that will support small family farms, farmers markets, things like that, and stop subsidizing industrial animal agriculture. We're going to have a heck of a time. I mean, they're so entrenched. The way a lot of things, I think, ultimately are going to change is with the market, with people changing what we buy. And by eating foods that are healthy, by going to farmers markets and supporting that type of food, we're going to support that type of agriculture and supporting businesses that are also providing vegan food. That supports, a more sensible approach. So I think a lot of it's going to come from the market. Yeah.
I wonder if you have any comments to go back to this woman's comment about, because I've heard it countless times, I've tried to go vegan, I've tried to go vegetarian, I feel tired. A little bit about the detoxification process.
Oh, that's a good point.
If you're alcoholic or you're a smoker, if you stop smoking, you feel horrible, and you're going to feel worse before you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
I've known people on standard American diet that stop and they try to go vegan or vegetarian, and their body's just kind of working through that.
Yeah.
And I think people think that if they go vegan, they're going to feel great all of a sudden. And when I switched, I know I did feel good right away. It takes time, so to make that judgment so quickly, that your body's really trying to tell you something, so you have to be patient and give it some time.
That's a good point. Did you hear that? Yeah, patience. At first. Yeah, there you go. Right, so that's a very good point. That sometimes changing away from an unhealthy thing like not soda or not meat, well, there will be an adjustment where you will feel worse before you feel better. That's a very good point to make. Yeah.
Just to add to that, I always tell people, overeat the good stuff, because a lot of times when they go from meat eater to vegan or vegetarian, they eat healthy and they only eat a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Enough. So just overeat, throw bananas with agave nectar, and do your smoothies and eat a big breakfast. You don't eat a little tiny, bowl of applesauce.
So overeat the good stuff is the message there. Yeah, and greens are like the superfood. Greens like kale, deep leafy greens, big salad. Yeah, yeah.
I'm really interested in the whole law, behind all of this, and I wondered if you might be able to speak a little bit to some of the new pushes going on nationally with some of the
Yeah. Well, no, in terms of laws, and I didn't really go too much into that, but we've tried to pass laws for many, many years. We'd get a bill introduced, and it would go to the Agriculture Committee, either in Washington, D.C. or at a state legislature, and it would die without a hearing, because these ag committees are made up of legislators very friendly to agribusiness. Then about 10 years ago, we said, you know what? We're going to go around the ag committee. We're going to go to the people. So we started with initiatives. We did this in Florida for the first time, and it was on the ballot in 2002, an initiative to ban gestation crates for breeding pigs. Voters in Florida voted to ban gestation crates in 2002. Then we went to Arizona, put a measure on the ballot to ban gestation crates and veal crates. They passed it in Arizona in 2006. Then we went to California in 2008. And in addition to veal crates and gestation crates, we added battery cages for egg-laying hens. Now, California is the number one agricultural state. It's like the number 5 egg-producing state. So the industry dug in, and they spent like $10 million trying to defeat this measure. It's Proposition 2 in California. So in November 2008, Prop 2 was on the ballot. California citizens voted to ban veal crates, gestation crates, battery cages. Now, as this was going, the veal people and the pig people said they were going to phase out veal crates and gestation crates. So they got the message after Arizona in 2006 and made announcements they're going to phase those things out. So that was good. And several other states have now passed laws banning veal crates and gestation crates, and a couple have passed laws banning battery cages. So the veal people and the pig people were going to start phasing out those crates. The egg people were digging in. So we were going after the egg people, and we were going to do some more initiatives in Washington State and Oregon. We collected the signatures to get on the ballot in Washington, and then the United Egg Producers came to the table and said, how about we get a federal law that we can all live with? So there was a negotiation, and there's going to be a federal bill introduced to ban battery cages nationwide.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And so now this bill is going to be supported by the United Egg Producers, which is pretty amazing.
My God.
Now, it's not everything we would want. You know, it's going to just give the hens about twice as much space as they have now, which is something. It's going to require that they have perches and nest boxes, so these are all pluses. It's also, one of the best things, I think, is that it's going to require that the eggs are labeled, that they come from hens in cages, or hens in enriched cages, or hens in free range. So there's going to be some labeling as well. But now the bill has not yet been introduced, and the cattlemen and the pork producers and some of the other industry groups are probably going to oppose it. So it's going to be a bit of a battle in Washington. So we're supporting it. HSUS was the main animal group that negotiated with United Egg Producers, and they signed an agreement with them. And so we're hopeful, but that would be massive. If this thing goes forward, it would be the first law ever to ban a cruelty on a farm. It'd be the first law ever to deal with chickens, on farms especially. And it would set a precedent. So that's pretty big news. Yeah.
Could you say a word about the conference that you're having this weekend
Yeah.
in Washington, and could Holly Cheever to present?
Yeah. This weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday this week, we're having a conference to end factory farming in Washington, D.C. We'll have a lot of amazing speakers, including a journalist from Time Magazine, John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods, a bunch of environmental folks, health folks, animal people, including Holly Cheever, Dr. Holly Cheever, who's here, who'll be giving a presentation. So yeah, would you like to say anything about what you're going to tell us? Or you had your hand up, you want to say something else, you can do that too.
Well, actually, I wanted to respond to your question, but just briefly for my friend Donna, I'm charged with two things. I'm given a half hour to talk about an overview of what factory farming is, and I will not be showing photos. I appreciate, Gene, that you have to tailor this to a certain audience, and if it's too gory, Val, you have to remember that you've already primed these people.
Yeah, it's a different audience. Oh, definitely.
But it will be definitely, I'm good with words, and I'll be talking about what each species needs, what is their psychological and their physical needs, what have they been evolved for millions of years behaviorally to require to be healthy, and how none of that gets addressed and how brutal it is in factory farming. And they'll be doing a panel on sentience. You know, how do the scientists jump through hoops to prove that these animals have no feelings or emotions, and you almost go, it must have taken you 1,400 hours to come up with that convoluted, disturbingly inaccurate concept to disprove what everyone else can recognize, that your animal does have feelings and interact. So basically, I'll be telling my favorite animal stories. But can I segue from that just to respond to your concern earlier? About 7 or 8 years ago, Farm Sanctuary in Gene brought an initiative before the American Veterinary Medical Association, who are, to be quite candid, the arch enemy of anything progressive in food animal production, because they're very tied in with agribusiness and with the pharmaceutical industry. And at the same time that they were slamming the whole concept of getting sows out of gestation crates, which are brutal. I mean, a sow in her own world will spend days making nests for her future farrowing. And then this nest doesn't work out right, so she'll go on to another one, and she gets everything just right. And then, of course, the farrowing crate situation, all of those instincts, all of those urges are denied. So the inhumane thinks that's lovely. They want to keep on with gestation crates. But at the same time, there was a pork producer, veterinarian from Canada, who came and gave detailed descriptions of 4 different cage-free, gestation crate-free, farrowing crate-free systems from traditional farmers, who went from factory farming to free ranging with their sows. And every one of the 4 systems, first of all, showed happy sows, clean animals, shocking, no aggression. Farmer could go like scratch their back, and sow leans in to get
like a dog.
And they all not only were happy animals, the farmers, to a man and woman, said that their quality of life went soaring up, their profits went up. It made no sense to go back to the old way because they were economically and psychologically happier, and they produced a product they could be proud of. We talked a minute ago about the whole market-driven thing. More and more people are saying that they are willing to pay that extra dollar to buy pork from that kind of a producer rather than a gestation crate. And there's a group called Animal Welfare Institute in Washington that has a whole program of certifying humane raised animals. So for instance, when you want to buy milk from a certified group in the AWI, Animal Welfare Group, that calf does cow's milk, and 75% was off the market, and people will pay a higher price for that milk because they know that there's not the suffering involved. So I think as our culture evolves, as people like Jean, in fact, there's no one like Jean, but movements like Jean, encourage more people to reach out to more people, I think you'll find that there will be a bit of a paradigm shift in what people are willing to pay for. And with 7 billion people as of 2 days ago, we all have to eat less factory farmed, commercially, exploitive and environmentally devastating products in general. So, anyway, but if you can, the farmers that have switched over have found that it is in fact satisfying and possible to do so.
Yeah, can you imagine what it would be like to work in one of these factory farms? It turns farm work into factory work. It's not pleasant work. And in terms of eating less meat, the United Nations even talks about that with the human population growing. We just don't have enough resources to live sort of an American style of life. So we're going to have to move in that direction anyway. We just don't have enough world to grow so much grain to feed so many animals.
Getting back to what I mentioned before, one of the things that really struck me with the factory farming, especially in the stockyards and stuff, was the fact that these cows are all in the stockyard and they're in such close confinement, close quarters, that's why they have to be given the antibiotics and stuff.
Right.
And then they come in with an airplane and they fly over these cows and they spray because of the bugs. They're so bad in there because there's manure and everything all over the place. And they're not only spraying the cows, they're spraying their food, their water, and then we're eating that stuff.
Right.
So I think, that really needs to be brought to public attention.
Yeah, no, it's true.
They don't realize that.
There's hazardous stuff that goes into this food for sure. Yeah.
And to touch on what Jen just said too, in small ways, trying to mention to people, because like you said, a lot of people just don't want to hear about it. They don't want to think where, the Price Chopper counter, where that stuff came from. But I'll touch on too, and in my own family too, it's like the McDonald's and the Burger Kings, and they're wondering why their kids are obese, and they're wondering, a lot of things. And it's, if they really stop to think of what's going on with places like McDonald's and Burger King and all the majority of fast food places, but to realize, and I'll give them tidbits of information as much as they can handle, because they can only handle it in little pieces. But then all of a sudden they'll actually start asking questions about things, and they'll start to read. The people don't think with the pesticides. They don't think about the antibiotics. They don't think of anything that's going into these animals before it shows up as a burger someplace.
You're right. No, we're so disconnected. We just don't think. And I think just providing good examples, having good food and eating good food and showing people what that's like can really be positive too and create change. And, again, we're social animals. We do what those around us do. So I think it's important to educate people about the bad things that are happening. But it's also very good to show people the good things that are happening. Get involved with some of these local vegan groups, and go out and hang out and go to a vegan potluck and enjoy food together, And forever, us humans have gathered around food. That's the notion, breaking bread. So doing this positive thing as well as exposing the bad thing is, I think, very important. Just as cruelty has become the norm on these factory farms, and just as unhealthy living has become acceptable somehow, that's the way it's supposed to be, it doesn't have to be that way. Kindness can spread, and healthy living can also become contagious. And that's, I think, what can happen when people start talking about these issues, getting together with others with similar feelings, and change can be huge. And I don't know what our time is like.
Yeah, I was just looking at the time. We have time for one more question, and then what I do want to mention, folks, is that if you had this sheet here, Join Farm Sanctuaries Advocacy Campaign, please pass it forward if you, because we had a whole lot and they're not here now, so we know they're in the audience. And if you are interested in getting involved with Farm Sanctuary, it's very easy to remember. It's www.farmsanctuary.org. So we have one more question.
Yeah. Yeah, there was actually there was a fur farm across the street from us when we first got the farm in Watkins Glen. And needless to say, we were very unhappy about that. And thankfully, he's no longer raising foxes for fur, and he now has a veggies and craft stand. But that's different than the other veganic farm that's across the street. There's some folks that actually bought a 60-acre old beef farm and turned it into a veganic farm. It's really neat. And maybe take one more question.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
And then we'll...
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted
you had your hand up. No, well, thank you. That's, we are, again, social animals. We're affected by our social environment and our, physical environment. And factory farms are horrible places. And the animals experience hell there, and we're part of it when we're in those places. But when you come to a place like Farm Sanctuary, it's the opposite. And it's a beautiful thing for the animals and for us. So, no, thanks for saying that. And I encourage people to come visit if you haven't. And we have events. The first weekend in August, we have a hoedown. First weekend of August, where there's dancing and there's a campfire. People pitch tents and camp on the farm for the hoedown. And then we also, every weekend, or every year, on the weekend before Thanksgiving, we do a celebration for the turkeys, where we feed the turkeys, don't eat the turkeys. So these are some things that are happening. And again, it's a community thing. And it's important to be around like-minded, supportive people. Because, again, we are social animals, and we need to feel validated and part of a community. So come to the farm, also get involved with folks here locally, and I guess I'll end with that, and I'll be here happy to sign books and answer any other questions people have. But thank you all very much for being here.
Yeah, that was great. All right.
Thank you very much.
All right, so thank you, everyone, and if you are interested in a book, we do have a book signing down front, and thank you very much. Staying positive is better than showing this stuff.
For different people,
yeah.